Aloha Hawaii, this is Pokalai Nui and you're listening to Hawaiian Potpourri on radio station KWAI. Time now is 5:36. If you would like to call and share an opinion on any of our discussion topics, telephone number is 524-1080. Give me a call. We'll put you on the radio, see what you think about these multiplicity of topics that we have been talking about. Let's see. We tend to be speaking mostly about local issues this afternoon, and with that in mind, I'm trying to see if there are other issues that we can deal with that talks about local issues. We've talked about, and maybe not really exhausted, although I can be exhausting, about rail, and so I won't get into that. What else is happening in Hawaii? Well, let's go to our callers. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Hi, Polka.
Yes, hello.
You know, talk about depression and all that. I get depressed at just listening to, you know, the powers that be, how they've kind of taken over. You know, I mean,
yes,
as far as going way back to colonial times, and in a way, I mean, how do you think we're ever going to get Hawaii back again, the nation of Hawaii, and you know, yeah, I just like to hear. I mean, inspire us.
Okay.
Because you know, it just seems so overwhelming the power that these folks have over all of us. You know, I mean, the only thing I can figure out is if things just totally really break down and we start anew.
Yes.
You know, and I mean, you know, working through the political process is just, it's almost nonsense now. I mean, like the Occupy movement, the forces that will be, they just get their tear gas and their bayonets out, or whatever we call their batons, and beat people and just do. I mean, see, that's what we did back in the '60s. We stood there. We took took these things nonviolently, and you know what? There was a lot of coverage, and the overwhelming majority of folks realized the outrage of this because they saw it on national TV. Nowadays, they don't even cover that much because the mainstream media folks are pretty much bought and paid for too. You know, and so. And that example of the rail too. It's kind of it's been bought and paid for already. And of course, now here's a glimmer of hope is Cayetano, and if he gets in, but even then, I bet you he'll have a heck of a time. Well, maybe through the courts. But he's going to have a heck of a time with these folks that just have. Oh, I mean, they're scammers. They've been scamming us for a long time, you know. So anyway, let me just listen to your inspiration.
All right, thank you for calling. Take care, aloha. And I will at least give my ideas, but we do have another caller. So what I'll do is I'll take the other caller, and then I'll try to address this question: how do we unravel what has been compounded on us for so many years, and it seems like an almost impossible task, but how do we address it? Okay, so we'll get to that right after this caller. Aloha caller, thank you for calling.
Hello, Polka, how are you today?
Fine.
Good, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you fine.
Okay, your voice is a little bit soft, but that's probably my phone.
Okay, go ahead. I'll try to turn it up as well.
Well, I want to kind of respond to the previous caller. I think that, first of all, this show gives inspiration to a lot of people because of the nature of the discourse, so I want to thank you and all the participants on it. I just returned from the continental United States, where I, continue to see the level of the depression and hopelessness that's going on. I'm a social scientist, and I have participated as a participant observer researcher, and I have looked at I've interviewed over 120 persons in New York, in New Orleans, in Tampa, and a few here in Honolulu. And the first point I'd like to make is that I think there's room for all forms of organizing, so that we can come up with solidarity and a plan of action that transcends ethnicity and race and economic interests, environmental interests, and that's inclusive of all of them. So for Hawaii, I think there are a small number of white people who are willing and interested and committed to the struggle for Hawaiian sovereignty. And so I see that being a part. But one of the things my research has told me in analyzing the data of the 120 interviews is that efforts like the occupation movement, one of the questions I asked people in the 120-plus interviews is, in times of economic depression and recession, we know from research that the number of suicide attempts, domestic violence, alcohol abuse, substance spikes goes up dramatically.
Okay.
But what I'm interested in is not the problems that ensue, but the hopefulness and healthy outcomes. And so do you as a participant, have you seen or have you experienced positive mental health outcomes from being a participant? And across the board, the participants indicated, yes, it's a means of coming together. It's a means of educating more clearly not only what the problems are, but how we can yes, it's inspiration for us because it really represents a form of democracy that a lot of people will say is aimless or goalless when they don't have a clue of what's going on within the movement. So all to say that I think
Michael, at this point, your voice is breaking up, so it's hard to understand you at this point.
Okay.
I think I caught most of your earlier comments. So.
Okay. Well, I maybe can end this by saying the solution that I think restores hope. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now I'm hearing you okay.
Is for people to come together across ethnic, gender, religious lines and organize, because I think this summer is going to reflect a revived occupation movement that will direct a lot of energy towards the presidential conventions that are happening. And while certainly the last caller is entitled to the idea of asserting violence as a means to express ourselves, I want to say that the occupation movement that I have seen in several states is based upon a nonviolent movement, and I think the caller is right. I have observed police violence that was unprovoked by women and elderly people in New York City right before they kicked everyone out of Liberty Square. And so I want to emphasize that perhaps we can do something here in Hawaii to convene a meeting of key persons in the progressive movement and to see what we can do to organize based on a consensus that works outside of the political structure, which I think your last caller is right, that it's hopeless. And I'll leave those comments alone.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for calling. Which also gives me an opportunity to formulate my response to David's earlier call. What are my views, and is there any hopefulness in overcoming what seems to have compounded into an unresolvable issue? We just finished the, this voyage of Aloha, which was a combination of the peace and forgiveness project here in Honolulu, which has been an ongoing project under the leadership of Roger Epstein, and connecting up with Joseph Campbell Foundation. And Joseph Campbell's story of the hero's journey. And if you look at the structure of the hero's journey, it's a hero or a person who is plucked out to become the hero, and then he faces what seems to be insurmountable difficulties. And then as he meets those challenges and is successful, and then he returns home to share the word of how the journey went and spreading the benefits of the success of that journey. I guess it's to say that one's journey begins when one sees a problem as being almost insurmountable. And so if you look at the Star Wars stories and other stories of Joseph Campbell, that's the storyline. Okay, so David's idea of this insurmountable oppressive nature of the society, which gives us a feeling of depression. And what are the ways that we can resolve these problems? I think Michael's response also triggers in me the idea that, yes, on a line or on a listing of options that are available, I like to see it as a line on one extreme and the other extreme. On one extreme is the resort to arms, the resort to violence, the resort to making the changes because those people with the weapons, those people with the force, those people with the power are unafraid of using the weapons, using the force, using the power. And so why should we deny ourselves the right to respond in kind? And so the whole idea of terrorism is a resort to use of tactics that is somehow equivalating or making equal our ability to arm ourselves, just as the people who have the formal or the quote legitimate power has armed themselves and used it against the people. So sometimes you have that kind of rationalization being used, the resort to arms. Other people are saying, wait, let's not resort to arms. Let's approach this from a more peaceful objective. People on the other side is saying, yeah, but just show me where it actually succeeded. And people will point to Gandhi and others will point to Martin Luther King. But the arguments there is that, well, they also had partners on the other side. Gandhi had the press. And he was able to manipulate the press. He was also able to associate himself with people who had money, who was able to finance him so that they could keep him poor, but keep him on a move so that his movement would be successful. One of his sponsors asked him, do you realize how expensive it is to keep you in this poverty status? And so Martin Luther King also had his promoters and his detractors, and of course LBJ was one of his supporters from the congressional side, and so assisted in that movement for civil rights laws. So it wasn't merely the sitting in at coffee shops and restaurants, but it took a lot of bleeding heads and deaths, and it was a very difficult time. So I think that debate as to the use of force will continue, but the general persuasion, because people don't want to resort to force, and I think on the philosophical side, Gandhi had won that debate where he said, no, my choice is not to use force, because should I resort to arms and kill someone, then there will never be a correction of such a mistake. It's already a conclusion that has been made, and at that time people are not resorting to any more rationality, but merely who has the greater stick or the greater weapon. On the other side, it's an appeal to reason of people. But oftentimes people shut themselves off, especially if they're sitting on top of you. It's very hard to be reasoning with someone who is sitting on top of you when you're at the bottom and they're saying, oh, don't bother me, I'm watching television, or I'm eating, or I'm enjoying myself in some other ways. So is communication really effective? I think Michael has part of the solution, which is to, as you move forward, remember that the movement forward is not a movement to elevate one over the other. It's not a racial movement. It's not, and it should not be, a religious movement, nor should it be any other stratification or classification of individuals that will continue to maintain that dominance mentality within the society. But as we move forward, we need to change the society itself, which comes back now to David's earlier point and some of my point. How do we achieve that utopian society that we are all, or at least we talk about we want to reach, but we haven't really clearly defined that utopian society. And oftentimes after one person gets ahead of the line or at the head of power, and he becomes the president of the United States, we all rejoice thinking that he was one of us, and then seeing that his policies are not the utopia that we had envisioned. And so we may say, hey, Barack, what are you doing continuing with the war? Or what are you doing with all these secret investigations and the rest? And his response from his campaign position, I never said that I would do this or that. This is a general conclusion that you may have reached. So we need to be very clear. What is that utopian society that we are looking at? I would suggest that what we need to do is be very analytical about the approaches that we take. Point number one, we need to engage in a visioning and an agreement as to what we are envisioning. Not that we just object to the present state of being that we are in, but we also need to take the next step of saying where we want to be. And in order to do that, we need to first, I believe, we need to first look at what I call the deep culture of a society and ask ourselves, what is that society that we want to create so that we can avoid the continuing problems that we are now facing, the way governments run, the way we continue to have that domination mentality and the lack of consultation and the rest. And as to that, how do we envision our utopian society? I don't think we have had enough discussion yet. I think what Michael, the second caller, talks about is in that we need to gather together and get into that kind of discussion and formulate and develop new relationships so that it's not one of who or of a particular race or the Howleys against the non-Howleys or the Hawaiians or all that kind of stuff. And so that we can really start working with one another, going beyond the racial divide, going beyond the economic divide, going beyond the educational divide, and all these other things that tend to divide us rather than pull us together, including religion, sexual behaviors, or sexual preferences, and all of those things. And see ourselves as that community that we want to become. For me, my big thing is looking at the deep culture. I think not only do we need to do that, but we also need to change the deep culture from one of domination, individualism, and exclusion to olu olu lokahi and aloha. I've already spoken about that enough times. I won't get into further discussions there. And for me, also, we need to be an independent Hawaiian nation. Not necessarily that the nation will be allowed only for Hawaiians or that we need to only speak the Hawaiian language or adopt a Hawaiian religion or anything like that. But this place, this country, this territory, this region, this Hawaii needs to be independent from the United States. And if we are to develop terms with the United States or any other country, it will be through a consultation and a decision made by the people of Hawaii itself. So those are the basic ramifications or the basic contours of where we need to go. How do we go there? How do we reach there? We need to have that, what do you call it, a clarion voice that calls people together for that meeting. We had hoped to do that in the Native Hawaiian Convention. Money has been one of our major objectives, and I have not been able to conclude that convention. But there should not be only one startup. There should be multiple startups. This radio show hopefully will be able to be one, or encourage others to start up, to begin those discussions throughout Hawaii. In the meantime, people are saying, I don't want to continue discussing it, I want to move on it. But let's be sure that as we move, we know where we're going. And there are movements already taking place. You have many people individually who have said, I'm not going to participate in this kind of society. Very Gandhian approach, to learn to sit in the flow of power and just not become a participant to evil. So a lot of people are doing that already. Other people are saying, well, how do I do that and still function in this community? Other people are saying, well, I'm just not going to support the government. I'm not going to report my income. I'm not going to pay taxes. And if I have to, I'll fill the jails. That's another response. At the United Nations, we have some people, Leon Siu, Kaiopua Fife. I had been also participating in some of that. And so we are watching Leon as he negotiates and he talks to representatives of other countries on how Hawaii can be decolonized. So that's one process. Other people are saying, well, are there any other processes or more effective process? So we have Native Hawaiians gathering together and also asking ourselves, should it be limited only to Native Hawaiians? And as we address that question, one of the sort of the waves or the currents that we are floating on is the indigenous movement currents. And because from that perspective they are only looking at the Native Hawaiians in Hawaii, then we may as well catch that current. But be sure that as we catch that current, we drag other folks along with us. That's what we did in the Native Hawaiian Convention. So while only Native Hawaiians were participants and voted for the members of the convention, once we got into the convention, we started talking about an independent nation in which we can include everyone who wants to be citizens of the Hawaiian nation and provide spaces so that there is room for everyone within that space. I know there's a lot more to talk about. I'm watching the clock, and of course we won't have as much time. I will be back tomorrow morning, and perhaps we can continue with this discussion tomorrow morning. I will be back at 6 o'clock, and so we'll see what time we will have for that discussion. I want to thank all of you for joining me this afternoon on this program. This is Hawaiian Potpourri. We are produced by the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. I do have an editor who edits these shows because I videotape these shows, and what he's doing is he's loading it on the internet. And so the site, if you would like to see many of our shows now, we have quite a bit. The site to go to would be sites.google.com. Okay, sites, sites.google.com / and then now is site without the plural, SITE, another / and then my name, Poka Lai Nui, all in one, as if it's one name, POKALAENUI. And there you will see the multiplicity of programs. We do have a last caller. We have only 30 seconds. Aloha caller, you're the last one, and there goes the caller. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Talk to you tomorrow. Aloha, ahoy ho. This program is produced by the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. The opinions expressed in this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of this radio station or of the Hawaiian National Broadcast Corporation. Aloha.
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii. la anungu me ka paka. Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave, koku ana honoa o Pilani, ka ko'o mai kaua i o mano, pa'aku me ke oni o ka kuhi hewa. Aolea e kau i ka pulima, maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi, o hui ai nā ku ai hewa, i ka pono sivila a o ke kanaka. Aole makoa e mina mina, i ka pu'u kala o ke au puni, ua lava mako i ka pohaku, i ka ai ka maha o